Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Jamie Schenker-Passero, Associate Director of the Temple Small Business Development Center. We help small businesses start and grow, and we do this with our consulting and our training programs. Obviously, our training programs right now are going to be via webinar, and we'll be addressing topics related to the impact of COVID-19 on small business owners. Today, we are pleased to have Cassandra Bailey, the CEO of Slice Communications, joining us. Slice is a marketing and PR firm here in Philadelphia, and I'm going to hand the floor over to her. Please note that we have muted all attendees, and we will be fielding questions through the chat box. Please feel free to use that. We are welcoming all questions tonight. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Cass.
Yeah, thank you, Jamie, so much for having me, and thank you to everybody who's participating today. I don't want to say excited, but I am enthusiastic about talking about this topic with small businesses and small business owners, because I know that we're going to get through this together if we help each other, and I know that there are rainbows at the end of this storm. And so what we're going to talk about today is how to communicate right now to maintain customer relationships, and then how to start to rebuild and how to think about your marketing and start planning for it in the future. I will note that this conversation is meant to be inclusive and expansive. And so there's a lot of different types of businesses who have registered and who are participating. And we know that you come from different industries, different backgrounds, you're all having very different experiences. So for that reason, we're going to leave a lot of time for questions at the end so that we can talk about your specific challenge or address your specific issue. So I also wanted to let you know that we have provided some additional resources for you all, if I can get the slides to move, which I should momentarily, except for that is the last slide. So give me just a second, because the last slide and the first slide look the same. There we go. So I mentioned that we have some additional resources for you. This is a download where you can go and get a template to start to build a crisis communications plan. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about responding right now, but we're going to talk way more about how to communicate on an ongoing basis. But this resource is there for you. It's available. It's for free. If you have any additional questions after this, you can always tweet at us at SliceCom, which you can see in the upper left-hand corner. That is our Twitter handle. It's easy to get in touch with us there, and we can answer any questions that you have. I'll also let you know that there is a landing page on our website, slicecommunications.com/slice advice. And that is where you can ask any confidential questions. Things that you might not want to ask here on this webinar, or things you might not want to ask on Twitter, but you can fill out Slice Advice. We will respond within 24 hours and give you some best practices or people to talk to or resources or insights or information or data or whatever we can to help you with an issue, especially if it's confidential. So as we get started, communicating through a crisis and rebuilding afterwards, there are really three primary goals. And if you're able to do each one of these three things well and on an ongoing basis, you'll be in a much better position than you would be otherwise without a plan or without goals. The first thing is clarity. So it's very important when we're communicating through an uncertain situation that we are clear with our communication. And what that means is that what we're communicating is simple as we can make it. There's so much uncertainty right now, so many questions, so many people who aren't sure what to do or where to go, that delivering clear, concise, simple messages will help your brand connect with your customers and other audiences in a way that maybe other brands aren't. So first and foremost, we need to be clear. The second thing is consistency. In all communications with customers or otherwise, we need to be consistent. Now, I know that's very, very challenging to do right now because we're in a situation where we don't know what May looks like or what June looks like. And so it's hard for us to be consistent in our messaging. However, if our messaging includes and our relationships and our marketing include comments or thoughts about how we are adjusting depending on what's happening, or we're following best practices put out by the government or the city or the state or the federal government, or if we're communicating on a regular basis that no matter what, we're doing what we can to support our employees, those are the kinds of consistent messages that you can put out even in uncertain times. And then the third thing is that we need to maintain our community. Our communities of customers or other groups that support us are going to be the ones that get us through this situation and will be the ones that will lift us up as we're ready to, I don't want to say get back to business as normal, but get back to business in the new normal. And so if we are delivering clear marketing messages with consistency that are really focused on our community and making sure they have what they need, we're going to be in a much better position to engage customers over time and also rebuild. So I want you just to keep those three things in mind as we start to talk about some tactical things and some strategic things that we recommend for lots of different small businesses in your positions, in all sorts of different positions. Clarity, consistency, community. So let's talk a little bit about who your audiences are. We know that your customers are one audience, but as you're thinking about your communications, like I said, we want this to be inclusive. We also want to consider some other audiences. So we have our customers and clients. They're incredibly important. They, in a lot of cases, drive our revenue. And because they drive our revenue, they are our shareholders. But some of us might have other investors as well. You might have friends or family who have invested. You might have outside partners or silent partners, maybe other types of investors, and they're important audiences as well. The third that we need to consider are our partners. And sometimes our partners are people that we have joint ventures with, but right now I really want you to think about your suppliers. Your suppliers are incredibly important business partners because they give you what you need to run your business. And we need to communicate with them on a regular basis to talk to them about what's going on with our businesses and think about them as part of our community. Then we have our centers of influence. And these are people who maybe are our best customers. Maybe they are our best referral sources. Maybe they are reporters who have covered us. Maybe they are people online who are just our biggest fans and advocates and give us our best reviews. So in the context of those other audiences, we also need to consider those people. And last but not least, we have our employees. And sometimes our employees are also our customers, but a lot of times with our employees right now, depending on your situation, you may have laid some off or furloughed some others, or there might be some uncertainty in terms of your employees. And this is an audience not to be overlooked in terms of your marketing communications. Whatever you're putting out on social media, all of these audiences are going to see. And so while your social media posts might be really focused on your customers and clients, we need to recognize that everybody else is going to be consuming that as well. And we can't think that just the customers are going to. If your customers and clients are people that are still engaged with you on an ongoing basis, you might actually want to think about focusing your marketing communication strategy on one of these other audience types, because they may be the ones that end up being your priorities. But for the purpose of this, we're going to set this context primarily around customers and clients. If you have questions about any of those other audiences, best practices on how to communicate with them or engage with them, you can certainly send us those. So which audience is the highest priority? Like I said, we're going to really focus on customers and clients, but for you, it might be different. The next thing we need to understand is, what do they want to know? And for each one of our businesses, our clients and customers are going to want to know different things. So I want you all to take a second and pull out a sheet of paper or bring up a Google Doc or a Word doc or whatever. And we're going to go through and answer a series of questions. Here are some things that they might have going on in their mind. They might have fear, probably. They probably have some concerns. They may have some worries. They may have their own interests at heart. They may be thinking about what's in it for me. So take a minute and think about your clients or customers. And if your priority audience is not clients or customers, that's fine. Write down who your priority audience is and think about, like, what are some of the things that are really going on for them? What are the fears that they have? What are the worries that they have? What are the interests they're trying to protect? I'm going to give you a minute to just think about that and write down some thoughts. Okay. Now we need to talk about and think about what messages do they need to hear from you? There may be messages that they need to hear in general, but there probably are things that they need to hear from you. So think about your customers. If you run a restaurant, they might want to know if their favorite dishes are still available for takeout or delivery. They may want to know if you have gift cards available. They may want to know what your hours are. They may want to know what are some other ways that they can support you. They may want to know when you plan to reopen or if you have plans to reopen. So let's take a second and think about some things and write down some things that you want to make sure you communicate with them to address their fears or concerns. I put some samples in here. For investors, they might want to know their investment is secure. Your suppliers might want to know that they'll still order from you. Your employees or your customers might want to know that you have a plan, that plan's going to save the business. They might want to know that their family or their loved ones will be okay. Your employees might. Your community might want to know, or your customers, that you can help them. Employees might want to know that their job is secure, that you're hiring, or that you're furloughing and what furloughing means. Maybe they want to know that you're ready when things are back to normal and that you're spending this time planning and preparing. So you've written down your target audience. Maybe it's your customers, maybe it's somebody else. You've thought about what their fears and concerns are. So now think about what messages do you need to clearly and consistently communicate to them now and in the future. And again, I'm going to give you a minute or so just to write down some initial thoughts on that. This part of the planning might actually require some additional thinking. It may also require some conversations with your team members. I would really encourage you to have those conversations before the end of the week. So if you need to take a time during this webinar, take a little break and put that on the schedule to have these conversations internally, that would be a great outcome of you participating in this session. And you can use the worksheet that we sent in advance and that Jamie just chatted out to everybody to guide your internal conversation. So once we figured out the messaging to address the fears of our target audience, we need to develop content. And you guys have probably heard the word content a lot. Content is just ideas. It's just messages. It's just a way to start to interact with your customers, clients, or other audiences. So we're going to talk a little bit about the different types of content and what are going to be most effective depending on the type of business that you're in. There are 5 primary types of content, and not all of them are going to be great for all businesses. The first one is written, and a lot of times when people think about content, they really only think about written. Written content can be social media posts that you write, it can be blog posts, it can be ebooks, white papers, research, it could even be press releases or media coverage. There's lots of different types of written content, but that's not the only type of content there is. You also need to think about visual content. Visual content quite often will be more emotional than written content for a lot of people. We know that over 60% of human beings are visual learners, and so visual content can be really powerful for them. Think about emotional photos that you can take or charts that you can share. Not boring charts, but like interesting, well-designed charts. Think about infographics that you can share with data or information. Think about dressing up your menu in a new and different way. Think about showcasing your products in a new and different way than maybe you have before. This virus may give us an opportunity to be really thoughtful about our visual content. You may also want to consider including some audio content into your plan. And these can be things like town hall meetings via conference call. They can also be audio messages or podcasts or light versions of podcasts. Video content is often our most emotional content because it gives us the ability to communicate not just with our words, but with our tone, with our voice, with our body language, with our facial expressions, with how we speed words up or slow them down, with how we increase or reduce our volume. And so video content today, especially because so many of us have now become accustomed to Zoom conference calls or Google Hangouts or other video meetings, video content is expected to be in a lot of ways more DIY, do-it-yourself, than it ever was before. Video content can also give us the ability to communicate in short 30-second bits or in much longer bits. And then the last piece of content you might want to consider to deliver your message and engage your customers is experiential content. And that's what the Temple SBDC is doing right now, providing this webinar for you. This is an experience that you're having. It's a two-way conversation. You'll get to ask me questions. I'll give you as much as I can in the way of answers. But this is an experience that you're having and that we're all having together. And creating those experiences, whether it's via webinar or via some sort of like virtual type of roundtable or lunch or meeting or happy hour, these are some things that you can put into your content plan to engage your customers. So in some situations, you may be able to do all of these types of content. You have the internal resources, money, time, people to do that. But for some of you, you're not going to have that. So if you can take a second and think about the one or two types of content that are going to be the most important for you to effectively communicate your message to your audience, take a second, think through that, and write that down now. Okay, hopefully you have an idea of what one or two types might work best for you. Because we don't know how long this situation is going to go on, you may want to think about changing up your content types over time. So think about in 2 or 3 weeks, if you were to add a third type of content to your plan, what would that be to mix it up and to provide something new to your clients or customers? Okay, now I want you to think a little bit further about your content plan and identify what resources you might need in order to effectively develop that content. Maybe you have a great writer that you know who can help you. Maybe you're a great writer. Maybe you have great photographs that you can take, and maybe you're a whiz with Instagram. Maybe you need some help with your video project, and maybe your son or daughter is studying video or graphic design or something at school. So think about the resources you have, not just within your small business, but also in your network that could be helpful to you in developing the content you need to deliver your message. Okay. We're going to move on now from content, because once we have some that communicates our message effectively, we need to start thinking about what we're going to do with it. So the best message delivery tools. I get this question a lot. What is the best way to deliver my message? Well, right now, especially for small businesses, social media is a priority. More people are online using their social media channels than have ever done so before. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those social channels and how people use them in just a minute. But we also want you to keep in mind and think about adding email marketing and public relations to your strategy. Because in a lot of cases, these are the most effective ways to get your message out to your customers. Now, email marketing has become a little bit of a flashpoint, if you will, in the marketing communications world in the past couple of weeks. There are many, many companies who are just relying on email to put out messages, and it is wrecking inboxes around the world. Chances are you've gotten quite a few of those emails. A lot of times those emails are sent by companies who have not thoughtfully segmented their email marketing lists. What that means is that they don't know which people fit into which audience type. And instead of sending messages that are relevant just to the people that need to get them, they're sending those messages to everyone. That's a mistake. If you are going to think about using email marketing in your strategy, make sure that you are sending emails just to people who want to get them. For instance, you might have a list that you put together of your current customers. You may have a list of employees that you want to email. You may have a list of centers of influence or referral partners, people who send you business. And for each one of them, the message needs to be tailored. It needs to be slightly different based on their concerns and their fears and what's in it for them. And so thinking about your email marketing that way will really help you if you decide to engage with it to deliver your message. The other thing that we wanted to talk about very briefly is public relations. And PR and media coverage is an opportunity to get your message out to a lot of people. It also shows strength, and it shows stability, and it showcases your good work. So there are many, many reporters right now who are looking for different ways to cover the COVID-19 story. If you have good news to share, if you've pivoted your business in an interesting way, if you are working to help people or to donate things to healthcare workers, or if you're working to develop new products or services to address this crisis, all of those things could potentially be PR worthy and newsworthy. This is one of the wonderful parts about working from home. We're going to do another webinar in the future about how things have changed forever as it relates to the virus. And one of the trends that we've identified is that we, even as business people, are more human than we've ever been before, as we see each other's houses and hear each other's children and dogs and spouses and significant others. But to get back to the topic at hand, let's talk about social media, because that's what a lot of you logged on to participate in, and from what I understand, what a lot of you want to know about. So, oh, and we just put out a poll. How do you communicate with your customers in terms of your social channels? So feel free to answer that poll, because we would love to get that information moving forward. Great. So in terms of readiness, before you do anything in terms of putting out your messages or your content, you want to make sure that you've segmented media lists, which we talked about. You want to make sure that you have active social media channels, which I'll talk about in just a minute. And you want to make sure that you have solid reporter relationships. Okay, now let's talk about the social media channels. And we're seeing the poll results come in, and that's fantastic. LinkedIn is and will continue to be our primary business-to-business channel. Most people who are in the business-to-business community are on it. Many of them are relying on it more than they ever have before. And people are working to ensure that they are continuing to grow their business relationships and networks. Right now, people are also going to LinkedIn to learn about business news, to learn about best practices, and to learn from other people who are sharing their thought leadership and their expertise. So if you're a small business, is it a B2B business, and if it depends on thought leadership and expertise, then LinkedIn is the place where you really want to be investing your time and money. Facebook is our primary business-to-person platform. I think the newest data said something around 70% of US adults use Facebook, and many of them use it every day. So if your customers are people in general, Facebook may be the place for you. We're also seeing Facebook usage spike as more people are working from home and using that work from home time to check in on Facebook, to share news and information, and to see what's happening with friends and family. Twitter has always been our primary customer service channel. And the reason why is because of the openness of Twitter. You can learn what people are talking about on Twitter very easily. You can reach out and connect with anybody on Twitter. You can post any complaint that you have and tag a company or an issue related to the customer service that you've experienced. Instagram is our primary visual and our primary cultural channel. And so in a lot of cases, if you're doing something that is visual, if you're trying to engage with your customers, again, in a more open way, Instagram is a great place to do that. Also, if you're in the food business at all, or in the beauty business, this is where your audience is for the most part. Pinterest is a primary lifestyle channel. It actually is the channel that has the audience with the highest annual household income. It's also dominated primarily by women. You will see things on there that are very lifestyle focused, meaning parties, events, though there are less of those today, home products, home design, beauty and fashion, all of those things have a place on Pinterest. We also see that Pinterest quite often can be the highest driver of sales on e-commerce sites, depending on the industry and the type of site. And then finally, YouTube continues to be a primary educational channel, also entertainment, but YouTube, keep in mind, is the world's second largest search engine. And that means that people go there looking for all sorts of different things. Younger audiences think of YouTube as their primary television, actually, or what we used to think of as television. And so if you have an opportunity to entertain or educate, and that's how you want to interact with your customers, YouTube might be the place for you. So I'm going to check in on the poll real quick. In terms of how you communicate with the customers online, 76% of you told us Facebook. Number 2 was Instagram with 68%. Number 3 was an e-newsletter with 44%. And number 4 was Twitter with 32%. So it seems like, at least for the case of this webinar, we have quite a few B2C companies who are participating, those who depend on Facebook, Instagram, and e-newsletters. So I'll talk a little bit more about Facebook and how to start putting out content on a regular basis as we go through this. But before I do this, I want to spend some time thinking about, and have you guys think about, how are you listening to your audience? How are you listening to your customers? Do you have something set up so that you are getting their feedback, so that you are getting their comments, maybe their care, their concerns, their insights? What are you doing in terms of being sure that you can listen to them? Here are some suggestions. The first one is that Twitter is a natural place for people to want to talk to you. And a lot of times people will open up their Twitter and they will look at their @mentions. They'll try to figure out who are the people who are mentioning them on Twitter, good or bad. And then hopefully you're responding to those people. The bad ones in a different way than in the good ones, but also respond to the people saying great things about you. The thing that a lot of people miss is they just look at their @mentions and they never search for their name. There's a lot of customers that, or clients that are talking about you, but because they're not @mentioning you, they're not showing up in your mentions. Every once in a while, you should take a couple minutes and search for your name or related names, things that might be typos or accidents, and see if there are other people that are trying to give you feedback or share things with you through Twitter. Once you find them, you want to make sure that you're following them and engaging them, telling them that you appreciate them, and those sort of things. In terms of Instagram, there's also an opportunity for you to look at people who are mentioning you and tagging you in photos. But you may want to do even more than that. You may want to make sure that you are also looking at any and all comments that their communities are mentioning. So for instance, if I've gone to a restaurant in the past 6 months and I loved it and I posted about it, and I said that I love this restaurant, you might see that, but what you might not see is my 5 or 6 friends who also say that they absolutely love that restaurant. All of those are people who are your customers, who are trying to communicate with you and share their love for you. And they're all opportunities to engage with new and different people. So you may actually want to take a couple minutes or even an hour or so in the next week and go and look back at all of the people over the past 6 months on Twitter or on Instagram who have said that they love you, that they care about you, that they love what you do, or even those that maybe have had some complaints, and find and think about ways to deliver messages to them to say, this is what's going on with us. If you want to support us, here's how you do it. You may want to follow those people in an effort to get them to follow you back. And all of those are potential community members that, if you think about our goals at the very beginning, growing, developing, and caring for that community, those are all community members who could be people that you could engage in new and different ways. The last thing to think about is to make sure that you are checking your Facebook and Google reviews. And again, this is an opportunity to go back over the past 6 months or a year, especially if you haven't talked to them lately or you don't have email addresses for them, to go back and say, hey, we really care, that like we love that you loved us, this is what's going on with us, those sort of things. Finally, engaging with them is one thing, but as you guys, most of you said, you are also using email in order to communicate with them. So you might want to think about all of the people who have been talking to you online through social and ask them if they'd like to get email updates from you. And yes, this does require quite a bit of time, and it is a one-to-one communication. So people who have tweeted about you in the past, you might reach out to them and say, hey, we're trying to collect our community members or our customers on an email list to let them know about when we're going to reopen for any retail situation, and give them a link to where they can do that, and they can choose to do it or not. And so start to think about how you're listening to people, how you're interacting with them, and the people that have been trying to talk to you over the past months or years, and how you can start to have conversations with them during this time. So who will help you deliver this message? This is particularly important on social media as you think about people who have influence and who have following. Some of these people care deeply about you. They may be the people who have been in your retail store or have patronized your business for years. They are people who want to see you survive and want to see you thrive. You may want to put together a parallel communications plan just for them. To reach out to them and say, hey, this is what our plan is. This is how we're going to be marketing. This is how we're going to be putting out content. One, you may want to ask them for content. Say to them, we know that you care about us and we care about you too. And for that reason, would you mind putting together a video for us? Would you mind sending us pictures that you've taken before at our location that we can use? Would you mind hosting a webinar or co-hosting a webinar with us in the future? Those people are going to have reach beyond what you have, and their support is going to reinvigorate your communications plan in a way that you just putting stuff out will not. So think about a parallel communications plan, which is about engaging in a very deep way your advocates for developing content and promoting your messages. And I should have said this before I muted myself, but take a second and write down 3 to 5 of those people. Who are some of them that you could reach out to ask for help and support? Okay, so here are some examples. You may want to think about your employees, your managers, the people that care about your business. In a lot of cases, hearing from them can be very powerful for your customers. You might want to think about the people who do sales for your organizations. You might want to think about subject matter experts. So people who are really, really smart about what you do or how you do it. Maybe people who invent products that are in your retail location, or maybe cooks or chefs that come up with really amazing recipes, or bartenders who came up with great drinks, or sommeliers who have wines that people love. You might want to engage all of those people to help you create content and put it out. You might want to think about your best customers, like we talked about. And you may also want to think about your investors or friends or family, people who have a vested interest in the success of your business, to have them talk about why they believe in you and how they're working to support you. So, like we said, you want to create a second level of communication just for them. These people, if you reach out to them and they agree to be part of your influencing community, or your community of influencers, you may want to create an email list that's just for them, or a message board or a Slack channel that's just for them, where they can get together and say, this is what I'm going to do to help this week, or this is the video that I'm thinking of creating. And sometimes when you bring that community together in a really meaningful way, they start to build on each other and get excited by each other's energy and passion and enthusiasm. I was on a webinar earlier today, and the host of the webinar started with what she called a wellness tip. And her wellness tip was during this time to get a hobby. Now, she's not really a hobby person, and neither am I, but the idea of helping a small business that I really love and care about, developing content for them, talking to other people about what I'm doing to support them and why they should too, is the kind of hobby that pays it forward to a small business in our community and also makes you feel really good about what you're doing. So we get a lot of questions lately about timing and about cadence and about how often you should be communicating. Now, there are a couple of companies that are doing a terrible job of this. They are just communicating way, way, way too much. So we want to think about the different levels of cadence that we could have. We could communicate daily, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, or as needed. But think about your customers. How do they typically interact with you? Do they come and visit you every day, or do they rely on your product or service every day? Is it something they think about weekly or every other week? Is it something that they think about monthly, or is it something that they think about on an as needed basis? So it might not be appropriate to communicate or to send an email newsletter every day. It's probably not a great idea to do that because there is such thing as fatigue. But you may be posting to your Facebook page daily because people are used to seeing Facebook updates from you every day or a couple times a day. You may want to put out a new video weekly because people are used to engaging with you on a weekly basis. So just have a plan. The point is, have a plan for cadence. And if you have a plan for cadence, you're going to be in a much better spot as it relates to planning and stress and putting together and putting out content. So just think about real quick for a second, what is the cadence at which you think your brand should be best communicating? And you can create a different cadence by channel. So maybe on Facebook it's daily, but maybe via email newsletter it's every other week. Okay. There's another answer, which is never. There are certain people that just don't need to hear from you ever. And that's okay too, because those people, if you try to communicate with them in a way that's inauthentic or in a way that isn't really relevant to them, you may lose them in general. So just know that it's okay if some people unsubscribe. They're just choosing the never option, and that is their choice to make. I want to talk real quick about 6 common mistakes that people are making as it relates to marketing and communications. And then I'm going to talk about 5 things that you can do and that you should be doing to re-engage your audiences. The first common mistake is unclear messages. So for instance, people who put out messages like, we will absolutely be here and open next week. And then they send out a message that they're not. Now, I know it's hard and it's unpredictable, but then don't put out that message that says that we will absolutely be here next week. Be really, really careful about any absolutes in your communication, because absolutes will lead to confusion when the message changes. So you want to make sure that your message is clear. A lot of times people will overcomplicate their message, or they'll try to put way too many messages into one message. That's also a mistake. We don't need to tell the whole story on social media all of the time. It's better to break up that story into a bunch of different pieces, because when we put everything all in one, it can become confusing and overwhelming. But if we break up the message and make it more simple, then it can be much more clear. The second mistake people are making is just putting out the same exact message to everyone. Like we talked about earlier, you've got 5 primary audiences, and while you need to be consistent in your messaging across, you should also be tailored. And that tailoring should be focused on what their particular fears and concerns are and what they need to know. So when you're just putting out the same exact message to everyone all of the time, that doesn't enable you to really understand what it is that their particular concerns are. Now, I mentioned earlier that anything that you put on social will be seen by all of your audiences, and that's true. But when you're sending one broadcast email to every single person, and that broadcast email has 4 or 5 paragraphs, that lacks clarity, and that doesn't really address individuals' issues. Another big mistake is wrong delivery method. Like I said, way too many companies are focused on just communicating via email, but that's not how everybody wants to receive information. So some people will want it on Instagram, and some will want it on email, and some will want it by opening their, I don't want to say local newspaper, but their favorite online news source, and that's how they're going to want to get it. But we can't just depend on one, and we can't be communicating on LinkedIn, for instance, if our entire audience is under 25 people who like to buy shoes. We're just choosing the wrong delivery method. Another big mistake that we've seen lately is people who have scheduled social media posts and ads far in advance. The day that the city of Philadelphia decided to shut down business, I got a Facebook ad that said, "Come on in, we're open." Now that ad had clearly been set up a couple days in advance. They were not open, they were not legally allowed to be open, but nobody was monitoring those ads and posts. And so right now, and at least for the immediate future, we're really recommending that nobody schedules posts or ads for more than maybe 3 or 4 days in advance. Now that means that you have to do more work to go in and update things on a more real-time basis, but that is just the situation that you're in. You don't want to be in a spot where you're putting out false or wrong information because you just didn't put the time and effort into ensuring that you were doing things more responsively than just putting it all in a calendar and hoping for the best. Another mistake we're seeing is people doing one-time communication. They put out one post about what's happening on their social channels, or they put out one email, or they add one little thing to their website and they think that they've communicated. We all know that we're navigating a lot of changes, and navigating those changes requires that we are communicating consistently, not just once. So if you've gone through this planning exercise and you've looked at your audience and the message you want to communicate and the delivery method and the content type and the frequency, you will not be in this position because you will have done this work. But if you're in a spot where you've communicated once and nothing since, take the time to go through that planning exercise so that you are not one of those people who communicates and then disappears. And the last mistake that we're seeing is not knowing when to stop. So there are quite a few organizations out there who have just been posting nonstop the same thing over and over again, or slight variations on it, or they're just not responding well because they're not sure and they don't know how to create a diversity of messaging and a diversity of content. I should say a diversity of content because we want message to be consistent, but a diversity of content. They also have just been like blasting stuff out constantly that is over and over and over again about them and doesn't engage third parties or influencers or other people who can actually help them more effectively communicate their message. They're just posting and posting and blasting and blasting. And that's not really a good place to be at either, because fatigue does set in and people get tired of that. So like I mentioned before, there are 5 types of marketing that you can and should be doing right now to start to engage your customers. And all of these can be done on social media, but they can also be reused and repurposed in email or on your website or through PR. The first type is help marketing. So chances are you know a lot that your clients and customers just don't know. For instance, you know how to make their favorite dish. You know how to style their favorite outfit. You know how to help them develop a marketing plan or a communications plan. You know how to help them plan for taxes and what's going to happen with tax returns in the future. Maybe you know how to help with a PPP. There's lots of different things that you know that your customers just don't know. So you might want to spend some time thinking about content that communicates that help, that answers their fears and concerns, that shares your expertise and thoughts with them in a way that's free, totally free, easy to access, available online. You're there to help them. Help marketing is one of the things, especially thought leadership-based help marketing, is one of the things that we're seeing is really working well in terms of helping companies stay connected with their clients and customers, showcasing not just their CEOs, but also other thought leaders within their organization. It's helping engage employees in new and different ways when they get involved in developing help marketing. And it really also is growing their brand in a meaningful way. So help marketing is number 1. The second thing, analysis marketing. I know, super sexy. But analysis marketing is this opportunity for you to simplify things for others. There is so much uncertainty, so much confusion, so many things are unclear. And so if you're able to provide an analysis, to look at the world and say, based on what's happening in the world, this is the most important thing for you to know. Based on all the news and information, based on the regulations, based on compliance, based on what we're hearing from other small business owners, here is our analysis. and this is why you should take actions and not take other actions. That's the second kind of marketing. It is a subset of help marketing, sure, but it is a very specific skill set that you can offer. The third is pro-social marketing. So pro-social or cause-based marketing is the type of marketing you do when you're out there helping others. Again, it kind of fits within that larger help category, but it is a very specific thing. So if your organization is making donations, if you're sewing masks, if you're pivoting in order to help healthcare workers with your current facility or plan or plant or employees, if you are out there supporting charitable organizations with donations or with other ways that you're helping those people, then that's something you can include in your marketing mix, especially if you then ask customers and clients to do the same. If you ask them to be part of the solution, if you let them know that you care about this and that you hope that they do too, that's certainly something you can mix into your marketing right now. Marketing for others. So you might have suppliers who are smaller businesses than yours. You might carry products from really awesome, amazing companies. You may have even somebody who is your cleaning company who does a great job for you. You may have a school or a nonprofit that is doing really great work. And so whether or not you are donating to them or helping them out, if you support them, if you share things from your social media about them and say, this is a great organization, this is a great company, we love having them as a partner, we value this company, that is a way to let other people know about other companies and other businesses. And that's really, really valuable to those small businesses, and also gives you the halo of being somebody who supports the small business community. And then the last thing that you can do right now, depending on your company and situation, is recruitment marketing. You may be in a spot where maybe you're not hiring people now, but you will in the future. There's going to be intense competition for highly skilled workers, and there's also going to be a lot of competition for other workers, especially those who need to be hired at scale. And so there are some things you can do on your marketing right now that showcase that you are a great company to work for, either if you're hiring now or if you're planning to hire in the future. So one of those things that you could do is make sure that you are demonstrating your values, that you're showing to people online through your social media posts what your values are and how you live them. You may also want to demonstrate your expertise. That might make people want to come work with and for you. You may also want to highlight your employees, the people who are getting work done, who are doing great work, who are showcasing their hustle and are showcasing what it means to work at your company. Highlighting those people, doing videos and photos and quotes from them, or even having them write on your behalf about what's so great about being part of your company right now. You may also want to communicate what your company is doing to help in the economic and health crisis. A lot of times people want to work with people who believe the same things that they do and value the same things that you do. So by showcasing what you're doing to help and how you're part of the solution, now that may help you with recruiting in the future. So those are 5 types of marketing that you can do right now in a way that is sensitive, in a way that is focused on your community, in a way that is consistent and is clear, that will ensure that you stay connected with and top of mind with your customers, even during these very uncertain times. So I spoke for about 50 minutes. We're going to open it up to questions now. We're going to try to answer as many of them as we can. We can talk about individual social channels. We can talk about email. We can talk about PR. We can talk about different types of content or the types of marketing that it's okay to do right now. Or anything else that you want to know. We can talk about those things as well. So feel free to send in those questions and we will get to as many of them as we can.
That was really excellent, Cass. I appreciated that a lot. I think you broke down the do's and the don'ts really well. So thank you. Do we have any questions in the chat? And I may just launch another poll in the meantime. Let's see. Not this one. So we have a question about responding to negative online reviews.
So in terms of responding to negative online reviews, we always look at that as an opportunity to turn criticism into advocacy. I'd have to know a little bit more about the situation. So there's certain categories of trolls, frankly. Trolls come in the hate is gonna hate category, and those people will always be miserable, and that's what it is. It's best not to engage with those people. There's an old crisis communication saying that if you get in a fight with a pig, you both get muddy, but the pig likes it. And one thing you don't want to do is get in a fight with somebody who is just there to get muddy with you online. The best situation there is to say to them, I appreciate your feedback. I'd love to have a personal conversation with you. Can you DM me your email address or phone number so we can talk about this offline? That's a great way to then have a person-to-person connection with somebody, which often breaks down the barriers of real human interaction and connection. The second thing that you might want to do, and again, this is the second crisis communication saying, you want to validate concern and show action. So if the criticism is legitimate and it's something that, you know, maybe you did wrong or maybe you could have done better, the best way to address it is to say, we understand your concern. We're working on it, and say, can you send me your information so that I can let you know more specific, or I can ask you questions about what your experience was like, or so I can let you know more specifically what we're doing to address this in the future. So rule number 2, validate concern and show action. The third thing that you might want to think about is, and this quite often happens on social, is if somebody comes at you, a lot of times if you're just silent for a little while, your community will actually come to your defense. And they will say, I don't know what you're talking about. I've never had that experience with this business. This business is amazing. This owner is incredible. And that might be an opportunity as well to have your community address the criticism in your defense. If you can't deal with the criticism in one of those 3 ways, and you want to reach out to me more specifically about that and confidentially, you can do that. My email address is right here at the bottom.
And I definitely agree with taking things offline as soon as possible. That always looks professional. It's always a classy way to go, I think.
Yeah.
And there was a follow-up just to get a little bit more specific in the nitty-gritty. If somebody is commenting negatively and it's obvious that it's not legitimate, you know, like they've never been to your establishment, etc. Would you handle that any differently when it's clearly just a customer?
So we would recommend that you call it out, but in a way that is polite and sensitive. So for instance, if you get a review or you get a comment, you know that that person has never engaged with you, you might respond by saying, we take this very seriously. Our reputation and the service that we provide is incredibly important to us. And so we really do want to engage you in a conversation related to how we could do better. Now, if they've never been there, they'll really have nothing else to say, right? But if they have, then maybe they'll respond in that sort of, in a way that could then become productive. But by communicating, we take this very seriously. This is something that is a priority of ours. We want to talk to you as soon as possible. And of course, you have to mean it, right? Like that actually has to be authentic. But responding in that way will also show other clients and customers that you do care and that you are listening and that you care about what they have to say.
All right, we have a question. My company recently won an award that we want to announce, but we don't want to seem insensitive by posting good news and ignoring the crisis. How can we go about this? Great question.
Yeah, I love that question. We're getting this question about timing constantly. And this is our approach to it. People need good news. And so if we couch it in that sort of communication, we say, hey, everybody, we got some good news. It made us feel great. And because we think that it's important to share good news with you, we wanted to let you know that we won this award. We are so appreciative to everybody who is part of helping us achieve this award. It's really meaningful to us. And we just want to share it with all of you. Something like that might actually go over incredibly well with your clients and customers. Now, here's where we need to think about the delivery method. Because if we just put something out there in writing like that, you wouldn't necessarily get the passion and tone that you would if you put it out via video. So think about the delivery method and the content type for communicating that sort of message. If somebody sees somebody with some pride, but also with some concern, and maybe even say, like, we were hesitant about sharing this with you, but we wanted to because it was good news and it made us feel good, and we hope that it makes you feel good too because you're part of it. That might be the way to communicate something like that. We don't want to hold off those things until God only knows when, right? Things are so uncertain. And the fact that you won this award actually might put you in a really great spot to show your community that you care for them too.
Yeah, I like that. Ignoring the context around us isn't going to fly, but everybody does want to hear good news. So,
right?
Great.
Somebody shared good news with me today about like their business, and I was like, that was the highlight of my day.
Yeah, especially from small businesses. I think customers are hyper aware of the challenges that their local businesses are going through right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was this really specific question about a company that's in real estate property management and has had negative reviews from evicted tenants on social media and Yelp. It's difficult to control because of the nature of the business, and they have had so many evicted people as time goes on. So any suggestions there?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really rough spot. Like having to evict people, I imagine, is really emotional and really hard to do. And I'm sure something you don't want to do. And so I think in those sort of situations, well, one, this might be where you start to engage people who are part of your community and love living in your units or where it is that you live, who are willing to say on your behalf, like, hey, I had this great experience. So sometimes when you have a lot of negative experiences or a lot of negative reviews, the best way is to balance them out. And so to think about how can you start to engage influencers or put out positive content that's not just from you, but from others as well, that gives, you know, both sides to the story and gives people two sets of information that they can use to make decisions. Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, right? Like we're trying to influence people in the future to continue to be our customers and clients. So I don't know about you, but a lot of us talk about Glassdoor and we talk about negative reviews that we've gotten on Glassdoor, and job seekers that I talked to today, they're like, oh yeah, I know, you know, everybody goes on Glassdoor to bitch or whatever it is. What they are looking for is companies who are putting out an equal amount of positive, authentic, real things from actual human beings to help them make a decision about whether or not to apply for or take a job. And so I imagine that, and I think that it's very similar in the real estate industry. Yes, you have a lot of bad stuff out there, and so you need to invest and think about like how you can start to balance it with some good stuff.
Yeah, I like that. Question, what do you think about print marketing, postcards and direct mail?
So I am pro any kind of marketing. I think it really depends on your audience. So if you have an audience of people that are likely to read the mail and that like getting mail, and I'm not going to say that that's an older audience because I know plenty of young people who just love getting mail. Like that's okay, but you need to know your audience. That's the first thing. Actually, I don't know about you guys, but quite a few people I know have been sending postcards to each other on a like person-to-person basis, which has been pretty cool. I got one today and it's nice, you know, just to like get that little thing that's not online that feels more human in a way than a lot of the online and digital communication we're doing. So that's the first thing. Think about your audience. The second thing is don't just do print mail, right? If you're going to create surround sound, you don't want to rely just on something that unfortunately doesn't have a whole lot of measurability. You want to complement it with a digital or online campaign that does give you good measurability. And so if you're going to do it, great, invest in it, differentiate because a lot of people aren't doing it, but do it in a way where it's one part of a bigger plan.
Yeah, and I would add from the SBAC perspective, we always advocate for business planning, and part of that business plan is defining your target market so you know who they are and where they're getting their information from. if your target market isn't really somebody who's going to look at a postcard, then that's not going to be worth your time. And the same goes for any type of marketing channel that you choose to use. It really has to be so tied into your target market. And that goes back to doing some research, really nailing that down in advance, just to make sure your marketing efforts are as worthwhile as they can be, dollars and time.
Yeah.
There's a question, is it okay to promote discounts now for use in the future?
I think, again, it really depends on tone. So for instance, if you say, hey, everybody, we're a small business, we're doing the best that we can. We'd love for you to support us now, because now is when we really need your support and your engagement. And so for that reason, we are doing this special discount now that you can use at times in the future. Then, like, yeah, if that's your tone and if your audience is going to be okay with that and your product or your service makes sense with that, then yeah, give it a try. I mean, yes, we are in the midst of a healthcare crisis. We are also in the midst of an economic crisis. And so to know that there are things that people can do to support businesses, small businesses right now, to help us survive the economic crisis, there are people in your customer base that are going to be willing to do that. Know, though, that there are going to be people in your customer base, and chances are it's a very, very small group, who, for whatever reason, may take that the wrong way. I'll tell you that we've been doing some outreach, and we've been, doing a lot of content, and out of the thousands of people maybe that we've talked to and interact with, I'll say hundreds of people that we've talked to or interacted with in the past weeks and months to try to learn about what they're doing and to try to see if we can help them. We've had like one or two say that like they didn't think it was appropriate. And you know what? Sometimes it's okay to have those one or two say that they didn't think it was appropriate in order to get the upside, which is a lot of new relationships that we didn't have before.
Yeah, I like that. Are there any other questions? So I'll just give everyone a minute. What I also want to do is post in the chat a link to a survey for today's webinar. Since we are funded by the Small Business Administration, we are required to take feedback, and we also want to hear from you and find out if there are other topics that might be of use. I'm also going to link in the chat box our working document. We have a Google document of resources for small business owners related to COVID-19. So feel free to check in on that. We have all of our webinars and webinar recordings are housed there as well. Okay, questions. Tips for small business owners post-pandemic. So once we're on the other side of this.
Yeah, the first thing is to realize that we are not going back to business as it was. We're just not. Things are going to be different. The way people interact with each other is going to be different. The things that they care about, it's all going to be different. And so we need to understand that the marketing plan that we had in place, we can't just pick it up and keep going with it. Our audiences might be different. The amount of money they have to spend with us is likely to be different. And so I would say in terms of post-pandemic, you need to do some new planning and be very honest with yourself and with each other within the company about what your new reality looks like, what your new audience might look like, what their new concerns might be, and what are some of the new ways that you can help them solve it. The second thing is that people are going to be more accustomed to digital communication than they were before, and the way that they interact with companies online is likely to be different. And then the third thing that I would say is that there are going to be organizations that make it and that really thrive out of this because they've been communicating the whole time, and there's going to be companies that try to turn things back on as soon as the pandemic is open and or over, or trending in a way that looks like it's going to be over, and those are the companies that are really going to struggle. So don't wait until we're post-pandemic. Make sure that you're communicating throughout this.
Great. When would it be okay to ask for donations for a future event from other businesses that are still doing okay? I assume that, oh, okay, donations from other businesses for an event in the future.
The first thing is that I think it's very hard for any of us to tell which businesses are doing okay and which ones aren't.
True.
Right. And so like, it's hard to say that this company is doing okay and this one's not doing okay. And I think that we really need to be sensitive to that and don't just assume that an organization, because they're in healthcare, is fine, that they're okay, and that financially they'll be fine. Or if they are a mass production company, that they're going to be fine. We really don't know what's going on within other people's privately held small businesses. So one, like, let's not assume that. The second thing is that I think it really depends on your personal relationships, that you might want to reach out to people that you trust and that you care about and that trust and care about you first, and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this thing. What do you think? Is this the right time? Is this not the right time? And try to solicit really honest answers from them. Like, do a little market research before you do any outreach to businesses about any upcoming event.
Yeah, I agree. I think that honesty and having that cross communication really is key. So it's not just, you don't want to be cold calling these type of requests at this time right now, or even afterwards when we're a little bit more back to normal. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, we also don't know what personal loss people have experienced.
Totally.
If they've had loss in their families and what that means for their small businesses. I mean, so many of us know that our small businesses and our families in a lot of ways are intertwined, and that we as owners and CEOs and founders and entrepreneurs, a lot of times it's very hard to separate our business lives from our personal lives. So just be sensitive that somebody that you're doing outreach to might have lost somebody very close to them.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. I appreciate that. So I think that may be it for the questions. And we appreciate all of you submitting those questions. I'm going to, the last thing I'm going to include is to the SBDC virtual office hours. So speaking of communication and pivoting, something that our office is doing to make ourselves more accessible in this current climate is to offer virtual office hours via Zoom. So our clients can drop in from 3 to 5 and ask our consultants questions. So I dropped that link in there, and that's our version of communication pivoting, which we all need to be doing right now. So we have that link, the link to our other resources, the survey for this event. It's just 4 questions. And I think we will close it up for tonight. Cass, we really appreciate you. This is an excellent presentation. We do have a recording of this to send out if that is okay with you.
Sure.
Okay, and we'll make sure you have that link as well. This was really excellent. So thanks again, and thanks to everyone for joining.
Thank you. Stay safe and good luck, everyone.